She is the one and only Reecie Colbert, host of The Reecie Colbert Show, which you can hear every Saturday here at 3 p.m. Founder of Black Women Views, where I first learned about who she was and how dope she was. And she is the creator of Am I Trippin' and Sounds About Right. And she is dope AF. Welcome back to the Lurie Day, your favorite show, Miss Reecie Colbert.
Hey, Lurie, how you doing, girl?
Excited, darling.
How
I'm
about that?
it's weird. When this all first happened, I was like, this motherfucker right here. I can't believe
Mhm.
he's doing this at the last minute. But girl, the way I have seen sort of, I don't know. I don't know if he intended to do it this way, but we've been in some chats where we was like, child, what us gonna do? What us gonna do? Reecie, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling. I don't know if you feeling it. You let us know how you feeling right now, because you in the know.
Well, you already know in the chats. I was like, Joe need to go. That was me, but I didn't want to say that publicly because I
We
was
can
like, it
say
ain't
it
worth
now. We can
it.
say it now. We was a lot we wasn't saying, but we can say it
Yeah,
now.
I said he got to go. He got to go. So but I never said that publicly, and I
Right.
always said, look, this is how you get back, Joe. This is how you get back on track.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I'm excited. I'm excited. I said last week this time, or maybe it was Thursday on Clay's show, how Biden steps aside matters.
Yes.
And because this was not an inevitable result. It should have been inevitable. If it was a white man, it would have been inevitable. Even if it was a white woman, it would have been inevitable. But we know that
Yeah.
there were forces organizing against Vice President Kamala Harris. But we shined a light on it on
Right.
Urban View. People
Yep.
like AOC shined a light on it.
Yep.
And President Biden stepped aside in the way that he needed to make
Mm.
this possible, where now Vice President Kamala Harris is the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, having clinched all of the delegates that she needs.
And then some.
And then some, right.
Right.
There's a virtual roll call on August 7th. So look, we wrap this up. So I'm
Mm.
excited. I haven't seen, let me say, I know not all black people are on board, but
We gonna
I would
talk
say
about
that
that too.
the next most united I've seen us was with the Montgomery boat cruise uprising, and that
Oh,
share that was heard around the
yes.
world.
Yes.
So to see black women, you and I were on the call,
Mhm.
44,000 on Sunday, and then I've seen numbers 50,000, 60,000 tuned in yesterday for the Win with Black Men call, to
Girl.
see that we are strapping up our boots and putting our pedal to the metal behind Vice President Kamala Harris. Um, Feels amazing. We could have done this in 2020, but it's okay. Look, I was the day one. I was the day one. So I'm
Sure
like, okay,
did.
we could
Sure
have done this
did.
in 2020, honey, but it's okay. We doing it now. And I think that there's just a reinvigoration in the race. Nothing is guaranteed, but I know now from the energy that I'm seeing,
Yeah.
we ain't going down without a fight. I felt like we
Right.
were sleepwalking kind of to it, and we was trying to shake people.
Mm.
But I don't feel that energy anymore, that people are kind of like la 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 la. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like people are at least alert and attuned to
Yeah.
what the assignment is. Now, if people
Yeah.
understand it, we're gonna see, but we're gonna make them understand it.
Right, right. Now let's talk about some of the folks who are not on board. And I remember back in 2020, one of the major articles that really helped to undermine Vice President Kamala Harris was this article written by a public defender who really came at her and attacked her record. And
Yeah.
that article, I will say personally, impacted a lot of people who I know in the legal community who were thinking about supporting Vice President Kamala, or then candidate Harris, Kamala Harris, and it shifted a lot since she then stepped down from that race and was then elevated to the VP pick. There's been a lot more nuance approaching to her history as the top cop in the state of California. But we're still seeing, and so let me pause. Because of that additional nuanced information, people were like, oh, wait a minute. Perhaps that one article, which helped to really seed a whole lot of other social media content, might have been misplaced, did not present a full story. And so we're seeing a lot more nuanced now. But let's talk about her legacy and when she was in the state of California as Attorney General, because there's still some folks like, well, she put away a whole lot of black men. But then, Reecie, I was reading that the black men that the men that she put away were abusers, usually domestic abusers. We weren't talking about low-level marijuana possession, which is what a lot of people seem to run with. So that makes me wonder if somebody got put away, what was they doing? But that's
Right.
another question for another show. What do we need to know about the truth about her history? And you're the best person I can think of to help us understand that.
Well, first of all, thank you, because the reality is a lot of perceptions have been formed on mistruths, on disinformation,
Yeah.
on that one article by I will call her a low-level lawyer who wasn't anywhere in the same geographical location as Vice
Mm.
President Kamala Harris. She was down in a whole nother county, and she kind of presented herself as though she were some sort of foil to then DA Kamala Harris, when
Yeah.
the people who actually were in the public defender's office, like a Nikki Solis, have come out and said that Vice President Kamala Harris, then Senator Kamala Harris, or then DA, was one of the most progressive
Mm.
prosecutors in the state of California and in the country. And so I remember that article distinctly. I recorded a 45-minute rebuttal to it.
Mm.
Um, I never posted it because what she did was so manipulative that
Mm.
it became, the saying, if you're explaining, you're losing. And
Right.
so trying to explain the nuances of, well, this is how the appeal system works, and this is how this
Right.
system works, and well, this was this person's jurisdiction and she was over here. Trying to explain all of those things is really
Mm.
difficult. One that stands out in particular was this. I hear this often, this notion that she kept an innocent black man. She blocked evidence
Yes, I've heard
for
that.
letting an innocent black man off of death row. That is
Mhm.
one of the most prominent ones. Now, people say that because it's been the telephone game um put out there, and they don't actually know the details. So when they're saying that, what they're referring to is a man by the name of Kevin Cooper. Kevin Cooper was convicted of double or triple homicide. I think it was double homicide, right?
Mhm.
Before Vice President Kamala Harris became the Attorney General, he had exhausted all of his appeals,
And I
okay?
believe this was happening, she was still in college when his case was really, like, so she wasn't even a lawyer yet
She
when a lot
wasn't a
of this stuff was
lawyer.
happening.
Yes, yes, his case was not in, Alameda County, it wasn't in San Francisco, his case was in Los Angeles. So, by the time
Mm.
that she comes into office, he had already been denied clemency by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Jerry Brown was the attorney
Mm.
general. So, there was no more appeals. So, attorneys generals handle the appeals within the state. The state,
Right.
you understand this, but in case your
Yeah.
audience doesn't, there are duly elected prosecutors throughout the state of California. They prosecute their own cases, but then when the appeal stuff happens, that's usually handled by the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice in that state.
Mm.
So there was no involvement with her office at all.
Wow.
This was a matter of clemency. And so through clemency, or part of the clemency process, they were trying to request DNA evidence. Well,
Mm.
the DNA evidence was that request was denied by Jerry Brown, by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Eventually, way later, Jerry Brown did authorize more DNA testing, and then eventually Gavin Newsom did. But Vice President Kamala Harris had no involvement whatsoever. Now, where her office messed up was, she said, "Oh gosh, I feel bad about this. I didn't know anything about this. I hope that Gavin Newsom, who was the governor at
Mm.
the time, authorizes more DNA testing." And people took that to mean that she was taking some sort of culpability or admitting to blocking
Wow.
it. But at the end of the day, there was nothing to do with her office. Clemency, as we all know, is a matter for the governor to decide, not for the attorney general.
Mm.
And I don't know if he was ever exonerated. I know that DNA evidence was more DNA testing was requested. I don't know what came of that, but that don't have nothing to do with her. So there are things where her name is attached to things that she doesn't have any domain over. But the highlights I would say is that no, she did not lock up black men for weed. I think that's a racist, white supremacist
Mm.
narrative that plays on the innate belief that Black men are criminals. So it's easy to believe that Black men were being rounded up because, of course, they're doing nothing but hanging out on the stoops, smoking weed, waiting for Kamala Harris to drive
Right.
down in her Corolla and pick them up and put them in jail. And that's not what happened. In fact,
Mm.
only 45 people in the entire city of San Francisco went to prison and it wasn't just simple weed possession. So the idea that she's just locking up people for weed is just absolutely ridiculous. It's counter to her record. And I can go on, but the reality is she was a progressive prosecutor. And at the end of the day, we need a prosecutor up against this felon. Okay,
Yep.
because the courts is trying to let him off the hook. And so we got to prosecute the case when it comes to the electorate and making sure that we say not guilty or that we say guilty, you ain't gonna be president on this ballot.
Mm. So here's the challenge with a lot of the way we are approaching it. And from what I understand, the San Bernardino County District Attorney's Office says that Kevin Cooper will remain a convicted mass murderer guilty of the remorseless killings because even with the additional DNA test, he ain't passed. The DNA ain't clear him. So there's all the evidentiary opportunities that one could have had in order to clear him have been tried. She, as you just said, ain't had nothing to do with it anyway. But even when the other people who did have something to do with it gave him more DNA, the DNA did not clear him. So
Yeah,
sorry to his family and to all those who, but sometimes people are in jail because they might be guilty. Not
right,
always, but
right.
sometimes.
Yeah,
And I need to address this point about progressive prosecutors. I vote for progressive prosecutors. We have a progressive prosecutor in Brooklyn, Eric Gonzalez. He's dope AF. He came in after a Black, Ken Thompson was one of the most progressive prosecutors at his time prior to his untimely passing. May he rest in peace. But we need, I may not like the prosecutorial role, but as
yeah,
an attorney, when I was in defense, I wanted to have good prosecutors on the other side of that table, Reecie, because if I'm going in to represent my client, I don't want no whole ass racist on the other
right.
side of the table. I want somebody who's going to be fair. Now, your job is to uphold the law. So if I'm representing someone whom might not be able to demonstrate their innocence, there is a risk there. But I live on one of them blocks where, our block in Brooklyn, it was some old people who was calling the police, Reecie, because them boys was doing them boy type things. The corner boys would sometimes get a little too excited. So let's not act like Black people do not want and deserve to be safe in our communities. And again, this idea that some Black people were put in jail, well, did they do things
Did
that
they do
deserve them to go to jail? Because I saw like 1,200 domestic abusers. She definitely jailed their asses.
Yeah,
But you was a domestic abuser, so ain't that where you belong? Why you putting your hands up? Like maybe you should deal with that. And maybe
yeah.
if your daddy or your uncle or your brother spent time, then maybe we should ask other questions than just blaming the law for upholding the law.
Yeah, and can I just be clear? There is nobody in the state of California that is sitting in jail right now because of marijuana possession. That's just absurd. It's been legalized, records have been expunged. I've seen people on comments, "Oh, I still got an uncle in jail because she locked him up for weed." I said, "Well, then your uncle is a violent degenerate because there's absolutely no reason why your uncle would still be in jail 14 years after she was DA, unless he did something very violent, honey, not because of no
Mm.
doggone weed." So
Mm.
yeah, let's keep it real. And I know I was one of the people, I had people dealing drugs under my garage. And guess what? I was on the line snitching my ass off, making sure they got up out there. And guess what? They got up out
They
there
got up out
because
there.
if you see something, say something. So Black people don't want to be in crime-ridden communities, and that's what Vice President Kamala Harris helped in terms of solving the backlog of homicides. 73 homicides when she came in that nobody gave a crap about. She's the one who put an emphasis on solving that and crime victims services and neighborhood courts. And so I think her record is as close to unimpeachable as it can get when it comes to being a prosecutor in the 2000s. And I will
Mm.
stand on that hill and I will defend it absolutely because a lot of what people are saying is just not true.
Yeah, and that's the part that I need us to be really clear about because we haven't even gotten to I've already seen the alphabet gang, and not the one that I'm an ally to, the LGBT, not that alphabet gang. It's a whole other alphabet gang that
Yeah.
is rearing up and ready to go. I done got images and screenshots. I ain't never gonna vote for her because she ain't truly Black. So I want to talk about that on the other side because I just think there's some things that we need to address there as well. But I do want to say this: part of being a progressive prosecutor isn't just clearing out the backlog of crimes; it's also doing things like introducing teen drug court so that you have an opportunity to not go through the traditional criminal legal system. It's also making sure that a post conviction and serving of your time, you're going to get transition support so that when you go back into the outside, there are programs that are there to help you so that you're not just going to be abandoned to the wolves of capitalism coming out of incarceration. She had courses to help these formerly incarcerated community members clean up their credit, get their GEDs, so that there would not be recidivism. So if we're going to talk about her role as a prosecutor, we got to talk about the whole role as a prosecutor. And I want to liberate us and disabuse us from the notion that all prosecutors are bad. In my personal perspective, many of them are god awful. But that's why we distinguish the progressive prosecutors by giving them the label progressive prosecutor. And she was considered a progressive prosecutor at a time when that was not even a term. And they were, from what I understand, Reecie, and in the research I've been doing since, during the time when she was district attorney, they said she was soft on crime.
Yeah.
She was like, no, I'm smart on crime because she's smart. But they were saying she was soft on crime. So she never had this whole image of being this bad to the bone, rump them, stomp them, kick them in the knees type cop identity until we saw her run for president in 2020. Reecie, we've been talking a lot about VP Harris, and one of the things we were talking about, President Kamala Harris. One of the things we were talking about during the break was the rapidity, the very swiftness with people seem to understand the assignment. I don't think anybody liked how them other people do they old folk, and nobody was really a fan of how they was doing Joe. Even those of us who ain't never really rocked with Joe was like, yo, that's foul. Mm-hmm. But the way this has all happened seems to have opened up a different portal into another space. Are you seeing the same thing with the folks you're engaging with?
Absolutely. I feel like it's reminiscent of 2008, right? When a lot of people felt like they ain't never gonna let a black man be president. They ain't never gonna, and people kind of were pro Hillary at the time because they just had this fear of what would happen with the black man trying to be president. We would lose and da 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 da. And I think people didn't allow themselves the excitement of the possibility. What does VP say? They unburdened by
I'm burdened by what has been.
I'm burdened by what has been. Okay. They didn't allow themselves the imagination and the excitement of what it would be to have a black president until it seemed like, oh wait, the white folks voted for him in Iowa. And so then that kind of just put a switch on and we were like, all right, let's do it. Let's go for it. And I feel like now it's like a let's go for it energy. I think there was all this anxiety around they ain't gonna let her be the nominee and da 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 da. And I said it's not about what they let, it's about what we make happen. And because we galvanized, because they saw 44,000 black women on the call, because they saw $47 million come in 8 hours, $81 million come in over 24 hours. Everybody else had to get in line and trust and believe the 2028 contenders that quickly endorsed her. They saw their political futures going down the toilet if they pissed off the base of the party. And so everybody made a calculation, and that calculation was based on seeing our show of force behind her. And now we're united and we are going to make this happen. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me. And here's the thing. And that's why today's moment of gratitude was all about the power that we have. We are so powerful that if we think we're not, we ain't. And we can prove that we see how we can prove that over and over again. Reecie, I just need us to tap into the other side, because had it not been for black people showing up in that moment, we already saw, as soon as this man stepped down, we already saw the knives coming out. Who gonna be the new nominee? Could it be him? Could it be him? Could it be her? Could it be him? And black women was like, absolutely the fuck not. Well, we ain't doing is none of this shit, period. We wasn't doing it. And that show of force shifted things in powerful ways. And I think if we can keep that, and from what I'm seeing, we damn sure can keep it. I'm almost mad I'm not gonna be at the convention. I was like, well, wait, maybe we gonna be celebrating the anniversary in the islands. So I'm just saying I ain't gonna be there, but I'm gonna be there in spirit.
Yes,
but this is that moment. This is a shift, I think, in our understanding of our own power. And I want us to do it differently. I feel like, when Barack Obama was in office, we were so ginger about it. We didn't hold accountable. And as Dr. Carr says, we still paying for that lack of organizing on our part. But we can do this in ways we've learned from mistakes. We can learn from our past. We can do it better this time around. I'm just glad to be in this moment. What are you hearing from folks who have been a little concerned about her lineage. Are you seeing and hearing any of this?
Well,
I'm seeing
I'm glad
it.
you brought that up because this is not new, right? A lot.
Yeah.
I would tell you this because I'm a day one VP supporter, and the big reason why I have a platform and I really went all in was because of these same attacks that we're seeing recycled now
Mm,
that were thrown at her 5 years ago. This stuff is so old and recycled, it's not even funny.
wow.
The reality is that the if we go back to the first debate, the first primary debate, Vice President Kamala Harris got 80% of the negative attacks. There were
Wow.
20 something people that were running at the time. She got
Mm,
80% of the attacks.
mm,
The number one subject of the attacks was in her position on Medicare for all, wasn't reparations,
right.
wasn't, minimum wage. It was the subject of her race, her
Mm,
identity.
wow. That's a
Because
whole lot of attention paid to something that may or may not have anything to do with policy, Reese
it was
Cole.
right, and that was what was so absolutely extraordinary about it. It wasn't like, "Oh, let's have a debate about who was more progressive and who was more moderated." It was strictly on trying to undermine the notion that she is a Black woman. Let's take it back another step. Let's go back to the Mueller report, which talked about how Russia used race as a wedge. Remember Colin Kaepernick, take a
That's
knee,
right.
all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
They've been using race as a wedge because that is, if they can keep up this sowing this racial division and discontent, then we are weaker as a country, literally. And so what they've figured out, the chaos agents have figured out, the disinformation agents have figured out, is that the black people are the base of the party. If Black people had stood with Vice President Kamala Harris in 2020, we'd be talking about her
Yep.
reelection as president. But that's fine. Everybody
Mhm.
made their own calculations. They know that one of the strongest assets is that she's a Black woman. And
Right.
so if they can undermine her identity and so confusion and so cynicism and skepticism around her around the issue of race, then that weakens her. And so
Mhm.
that's why we see the number one way of attacking her is she ain't Black, or you have this whole ADOS thing or whatever the situation may be. If that's how you feel, okay, that's fine. So then vote for the mixed woman. Vote for the Indian and Jamaican woman.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
That still has nothing to do with the policy. That has nothing to do with Project 2025. And her husband has nothing to do with none of that. Vote your interests. But the reality is that Vice President Kamala Harris is very much a proud Black woman. I know this in my personal interactions with her. She's very much Black, blackety black, black.
Mhm.
She went to Howard. She's an AKA. She said it many, 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 many times. And so I think that we should just not fall for the okey doke. If somebody comes to you and they say she ain't Black, I ain't voting for her, say, all right, well, what policy are you voting for in
Right.
that case? Do you
Right.
understand the policy behind it? So it's a powerful wedge. I'm not going to dismiss it because they figured that out, but
Right.
the reality is, even with all of that, like I said, all this stuff is recycled. These
Right.
attacks have been lobbed at her for years. She still has high favorables, the highest favorables with Black people, with Latino people, with people of color. She has the highest favorables, some of the highest favorables within the Democratic Party. She posed better than Donald Trump for independence. And so now we're in a position where we can really defend her and we can make an affirmative case for her in a way that we haven't been able to do because she was second in command as
Mhm.
opposed to the top of the ticket.
Right.
And so I look at all of the unfavorables. I look at all of what we're seeing right now as her floor and not her ceiling, because now that we're all united behind her, the people that need to be, everybody ain't on board, that's okay. You can
Right.
catch up.
Right.
But now
And
we have a position, we have the ability to really blow this thing out the water.
And my thing is, were you really ever voting? Are you even registered to vote? Like all these people talking about being the chaos age. I'm like, are you even registered to vote? Like that white man who wrote that article in the New York Times talking about why I don't vote and you shouldn't either. He done voted in the last several elections. People are playing in our face, Reece. Isaac Hayes
Right.
had put out something today, basically said, FYI to black men, black women are watching you try and tear down an overqualified black women. And he gave, her receipts, whatnot. And then one of the alphabet gang said, which black women? We're not just going to act like somebody who claims to be black, who barely speaks to her supposedly black father. No, she better come up with a detailed blackmail agenda if she wants my vote. And I'm like, okay, I don't have anything wrong with an agenda. I would rather black men create their own agenda and then say, this is what we want you to pass. I don't know why we act and waiting on elected officials to create agendas for us. If you're the expert on your people, where's your fucking agenda? Create the agenda and then advocate for it. Press it. Like, do that shit. Like, let's do the work and not asking other people to do the heavy lifting for us, okay? If you're really trying to be... If you're really trying to not be enslaved by your history, stop acting like a slave and demand that other people do for you what you should be doing for yourself. But my response to this brother was, well, then vote for the pussy-grabbing rapist who hates black men unless he can pimp you out to harm your people and whose policy is going to have us back on plantations. See how easy that is?
Yeah.
That's a real easy choice right there. And then, the responses are going to be, well, she kept black men locked up. Reece, you just debunked that. And so we're in a point right now where I'm like, listen, you ain't got to vote for her because she black. You could vote for her because of her policies. But either way, you and this nativism, this is a dying path. This is not a path that's leading to liberation for any of us because it's not even structurally sound. Y'all talking about you want this, that, or the other from the government, but you ain't going to vote for nobody to be in the government to give you the things that you advocating for. It is a lot of noise.
Yeah,
And it ain't producing much. It ain't producing much at all. And then I'm sure there's some work that they might be doing that is, but this line of attack, Reece, I'm not here for it. I'm not here for it. Not this time. I can't.
Yeah. I mean, listen, 50% of the country doesn't vote. Hopefully we can get that down to like 30% so that we can have high turnout.
Right.
But you're not going to win every voter. I'm not going to be distracted by people who are not winnable. I'm not going to be bogged down in arguing with the individual. I will try to change the narratives, broad narratives. And that's what my work has been around Vice President Kamala Harris for 5 years now, in changing the narratives, correcting the record. But the reality is we have bigger fish to fry than how much you want to determine how black or not black Kamala is. The reality is that her policies uplift our community. The reality is we have a Trump Supreme Court right now that does not want to see us advance. We have a vice presidential nominee in J.D. Vance on the other side that thinks that the kind of work that Vice President Kamala Harris has done around Black maternal mortality and trying to eradicate the disparity that we're 3 times more likely to die in childbirth, that kind of work is racist against white people. He has railed against grants for Medicare and Medicaid to end racial disparities in healthcare treatment. This is who we're up against, and so I don't have any tolerance or patience for people who want to just be in the mud and in the gutter and have a very lowbrow conversation when our citizenship is on the ballot.
Come on.
Or as a woman, my autonomy is on the ballot. My child's future is on the ballot. They want to get rid of public education. They want to eradicate any gains that we made on climate change. It's hot as hell. It's not a heat wave. It's fucking climate change. Okay. It's global warming. That's what come on. So if you want to be lowbrow and you want to have that conversation, you can go distract somebody else. Cause I'm not going there with you. We got more important stuff to talk about. And then I'll just say Shirley Chisholm has Caribbean roots. Malcolm X, Caribbean roots. Sheila Jackson Lee, who just, our dearly departed ancestor,
just made
Caribbean roots. She championed HR 40. We are a beautiful diaspora of Black people in this country. Always have been. Always have been.
Right.
And Barack Obama has Kenyan. Is half Kenyan, half white. And
listen,
so we're not doing
your motherfucking favors got a Jamaican mama. And guess what? I will put my record on advocating on behalf of the Pan-African nation against any of these motherfuckers who's hiding behind their letters and their flags, and they don't even know that they all the ancestry.com that they just did is now owned by Blackstone. So it's a op. It's a whole situation. And I'm So I'm not here for it, and they're gonna catch it all this time around. Me not playing with these fool. No,
I
listen,
know
hold on. Let
that's
me stop. Let me
right.
stop. Let me stop. 'Cause I don't even
Yes.
speak patois. I don't even speak patois. I just speak my mama's voice when she be yelling at us, and when she yell at us, she yell in patois. That's all I speak. All I'm saying is, as a scholar of Pan African, as a student of Pan Africanism, I don't want to say I'm a scholar. As a student of Pan Africanism, and somebody who is literally doing the work of helping this reparations commission get our shit together in the state of New York, who was a part of the Racial Justice Commission in New York City, what I'm not here for is the bullshit nativism, self-defeating, because Black Americans, y'all ain't having enough children. I'm talking to the pure Black Americans. You don't
Yeah.
have the numbers and you ain't got the range to handle this shit on your own. Why? We never have. We are 13% of the population. And if you
Yeah.
cut off the Black immigrants, who, like every other immigrant group, is a part of your community, we're the only community having a conversation about excommunicating the group that is adding to our numbers, building jobs and opportunity. And yes, we got the diaspora wars. And guess why? Because white people benefit when we argue and debate amongst ourselves about who's blacker than who. So what my Black ass ain't doing on this show is allowing any room for any of that bullshit.
Period. And how about this? Next time anybody say something, why don't you go put that energy towards the census? Because we undercounted the damn census. Okay. So if you want Black political power, how about fill out the damn census? How about you go
How
out
about
there,
that?
Alphabet Gang, and you get motherfuckers to fill out the census so
How
that we
about
can
that?
get some extra congressional seats around here, get some extra congressional funding and
That's
things of
right.
that nature. So
That's
go
right.
on with that mess. Ain't nobody got time for. And Lurie, I'm one and done. So I'm definitely not helping the ADOS FBA lineage. I'm not multiplying that much more than what I already have. Okay.
She has been
Please.
fruitful and multiplied, period.
Enough. I
Reecie,
multiplied
I
enough.
love you, love you, love you. Thank you so much for giving us some time. I know you do an urban view today. You're gonna be on the river, so we know you got a lot of work ahead of you. But listen, we need marching orders, we need talking points, we need information, and you know I'm ready and willing and able. Sis, put us in, put us
I
in. Let
know.
our
I
community know
got
how we
you.
show up. Let us know how we show up. What's the best way for folks to connect with you and follow you hereafter?
ReeseColbert.com. I'm Reecie Colbert on all socials. And Lurie mentioned it earlier, but I have an Am I Tripping game and Sounds
Oh,
About Right game. And you can get that
that's
on
right.
amitrippinggame.com. Help us, Sister Al, honey, because I'm not getting these political coins. So at least you can support me through buying my game and get you some fun in your life.
There
Okay.
you go. There you go. We're gonna need a whole lot of fun to keep this train going because we
Yes.
moving on to glory, child. We moving on to glory.